Welcome. It is launch day here at Invite Resources. These are the best days. These are the days in which our new titles officially hit the street. We are so excited. Today is launch day for That's Good News, How to Overcome Your Fear and Evangelize by my friend Shane Bishop. Shane, join me. Let's celebrate here. Congratulations on your new book.
Hey, excited about it, Lynn.
It's very cool to see. We've been watching this develop and grow, for several months. We've been talking about this really for almost 2 years or so.
Yeah.
It seems like. So, yeah.
You called me and said, "Hey, we want to do an evangelism book. We think you're the guy to write it." And I said, "Hey, I don't have time. I'm too busy. We had other things going." About a year later, we touched base again, and the timing was just there.
Yeah, and boy, to talk about the time being right, the time right now in our culture, we've talked about this. We see this book and the need right now to help refocus the church on what matters and to re-educate the church on what it means to share the good news of Jesus.
Yeah, I think, you look at the past 4 years, you've got the political divides, you've got culture wars, you've got the pandemic. You've got all of these things that have stirred. You got denominations imploding, and a lot of churches have just taken hit after hit after hit. And I just think it's time for Christians and churches to start looking out the front windshield again and not the rear view mirror, and get back to evangelism, get back to faith sharing, get back to what we need to be doing all along. So this is kind of a get back to it kind of book. Let's get back to telling people about Jesus, and let's remember that the gospel is good news.
That is awesome. So if you're just tuning in, you can buy the book if you don't already have it. Pre-order sales have been awesome. Let me show the now available graphic, Josiah, if you could put that up. It's available on Amazon, of course, all the typical resellers. It's also available Barnes & Noble. If you're not in the U.S., it's available overseas. We've got it through all the bookstores around the world as well. And, of course, on our site at inviteresources.com. Here is a endorsement. This is one of your friends here, Ted Bryant, lead pastor at Granger in Indiana. He's already checked the book out and given this nice line. That's good news enters into our current culture with a critical message of hope for an often intimidated church. That's well said. The stories are fun and inspiring. The evidence is convicting, and the tools are incredibly practical. Boy, I hope that is true. This journey through Jesus's parables equips regular Christians with the power to evangelize in their everyday life. I hope you didn't have to pay Ted too much for that endorsement.
No, not too much.
That's good stuff. It's cool to see the kind of early feedback we're getting. I'll kind of give some stats here. Some of our Facebook launch team, which, by the way, shout out to your Facebook launch team, 470 people.
Yeah.
What a group. They have really gotten behind this book and helped it to get out. We've had 699 pre-orders just on our Invite site, not including other channels. We're starting to get, this is like election season when the anchors sit around and say, well, the returns are coming in slowly,
Right.
So, throughout the day, we'll be seeing returns come in slowly, start to have some idea, but early returns are indicative that this book is touching a nerve. It's doing well. People are excited about it, and we can't be more excited about that too.
Well, you never have to recover from a good start, Lynn.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 699 pre-orders. It was number one on Amazon even before launch day, which is something that's never happened to us here at Invite. Usually one of our goals on launch day is to get number one on launch day, and you accomplished that already a while back. In fact, we were looking at it before we started. If you get on Amazon here under Church Growth, you are number one there, new releases, but you're also in the top 5 here in all church growth books. So it'd be fun to see if you can get not just new release number one, but number one in the whole category by the end of today. That'd be fun to watch.
You know what fascinated me, Lynn, with all this is, this is kind of an evangelism book, right?
Yep.
But where it's really tracked is with church growth. And I think people kind of intuitively know if your church is going to grow, you're going to have to invite people and you're going to have to share the gospel. So boy, did those things really connect in my mind.
Talk about the formula related to that you put in the book.
Yeah, I call it E2D, in the same sense that water is H2O, 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen. For churches to grow, you got to do 3 things. You got to make new Christians, you've got to turn them into disciples, and you have to send them out to make new Christians. So 2 parts evangelism, H2, D, 1 part discipleship. what I find is that churches are usually very, very focused on the discipleship part, but there's no evangelism happening at all. And it's sort of like if you're trying to make water out of hydrogen and oxygen, and your solution is to keep adding more oxygen when you need 2 parts of hydrogen. And so for me, what churches do well is discipleship. That's where their heart is. That's where their focus is. But what churches are going to have to start doing if we're going to have a future is just get some evangelism going. And part of that is just reminding ourselves the gospel is good news. It's not bad news. And who doesn't want to share good news?
Yeah, if you get too much oxygen, that's like my truck. I got the engine light popped on the other day because it's the mix is all wrong. I've got too much oxygen, not enough fuel, right? So we need to add more fuel to the fire here.
That's exactly right. Not only that, you get too much oxygen, you'll be hydrogen and helium and all that. You'll be singing like the Bee Gees in moments.
Hey, so talk a bit about, so kind of going back a couple of years, you say that I called you and was kind of pitching this idea of evangelism, which from my perspective is your book. And incidentally, if anyone who's listening to this maybe has aspirations to write, I think most people never actually write their core book, because we go through life with a set of assumptions about the world, and we assume everybody else sees the world the same way. And so we never think to actually articulate it. And what's really cool about this is you've actually articulated something that from my limited experience in knowing you and watching your ministry, seems to be such a core part of who you are and what you've been about your entire life. So just talk about that background, that history, and your relationship to this idea of evangelism.
Well, I grew up in an evangelistic household. My dad, Fred Bishop, started No Greater Love Ministries in the mid-'70s. No Greater Love was doing men's ministry before there was men's ministry. They were doing street ministry back in in the 70s, bullhorn style street ministry. But the big idea was to equip men to share their faith. And so the street was sort of the crucible. Then you'd pull people back, you'd break into small groups, but it was all about evangelism. It was all about leading people to Christ, and it was evangelizing the people that went on these trips as much as the people who happened to be somewhere like the New Orleans Mardi Gras. And so for me, sharing faith was always something very, very natural. It was a normal thing to do. And then when I got into the church world, and when God called me to go to seminary and eventually became a pastor, I sort of brought that with me, that emphasis on evangelism, that understanding that people really, really need Jesus. And so in a sense, what my dad did in the street, I brought to the church.
Fascinating. Well, that's great. Now, and you talk about your dad a little bit and some of that history in the book. There's some fun stories you've got in there about that time you spent as a young guy in New Orleans, right?
Yeah, there's so many wonderful stories. And I learned a long time ago, boring preachers are usually boring people. And so I always tell people, if you want to be a better preacher, get out more. And one of the great places for me were all those years that I went on those No Greater Love evangelistic outreaches to places like the New Orleans Mardi Gras. I mean, you want some great stories? You go street preach on Fat Tuesday on Bourbon Street. You're going to get some stories. And so part of it is just that experience, but part of it too, I think when it comes to evangelism, a lot of people are just afraid. I mean, they're horrified to go to New Orleans, but they're really kind of afraid to share with their next door neighbor too. So part of these funny stories for me was just taking the edge off, just kind of naming the elephant in the room. Hey, evangelism makes us all a little uncomfortable. It's outside of probably 99% of our comfort zones as Christian people. So let's just realize that. And let's just embrace that and realize that part of this is overcoming fear. And I have found in my life a great way to overcome fear is just have some fun with it. Just kind of poke fun at the fear a little bit. It tends to go away. It gets embarrassed and runs off.
Church books tend to be kind of serious things, but when you sent me this manuscript, I was just laughing out loud. I was taking it down the hall and showing some other people on the team here. I was like, you got to read this line here. So it's a fun book. It's a fun read. And I think people are really going to enjoy it in a way that maybe they don't with most church books.
Well, Lynn, I'm hoping it's kind of where evangelism meets a little bit of exegesis meets a comedy book. I kind of got all those things going. I wrote the book short. I wrote it so it moves fast, because the reality is it doesn't matter how good a book is if nobody reads it. So I
Right.
wanted it to be a book that people would enjoy, they could read in one setting, and that it would really speak to their hearts, but it would engage them. And so hopefully through stories, through a look at the parables, through some really practical applications, I mean, I'm hoping people sit down with this planning to read it over the next week and just knock the whole thing out in a couple hours.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned, I want to get back to what you mentioned here a minute ago about the fear. That's the subtitle, which by the way, the book is sideways. So like this was our design from our creative director, Michael
Awesome.
Buckingham, which I love, right? It's lots of fun. So if you could read it directly, got to hold the book sideways. How to overcome your fear and evangelize. So that's the subtitle. And so talk about this idea of fear a little bit in relationship to your own church. You've been at Christ Church for a long time now, and I would assume that there's a bit of a culture of evangelism that has grown up there in response to you as the leader of that congregation. So talk a little bit about evangelism there, and some of this, maybe a story or two about somebody in the church that has confronted their own fear in relationship to it.
One of our approaches here is we think, for me, evangelism is like assembling something. You buy something and you have to assemble it. Here's one thing I've learned over my life. If you have to force something, you're doing something wrong. I think evangelism is the same way. It shouldn't have to be forced. It's intentional. You assemble something, that's intentional. You don't accidentally assemble something.
Right.
But it's not forced. And so for us here at Christ Church, we are always trying to create very natural avenues for people to share their faith. Just to give you one really simple one is we have Christ Church gear. A lot of church have gear, they have gear and various things. I remember, in the 80s, those horrible yellow, low quality golf shirts, and everybody put their church insignia on them. But yeah, we use really good brands, the kind of in style brands that people would wear. We kick our logo on it, it might say Christ Church, that type of thing. But the whole idea is this: you just wear that out. You just wear it, and it's something that looks nice. You're going to wear anyway. And when people ask you about it, and people do, we give people little business cards, and they keep those in their purse or in their wallet. And when people ask, boom, they just hand them a business card. So a few years ago, I am going to Sam's Wholesale Club for pizza. Melissa and I are going to Sam's Wholesale Club because I had like $3 for the pizza special. I have that kind of money, Lynn. So we're going in. I have this sweatshirt on. It just says Christ Church. And the young lady waiting on me said, Christ Church, is that the one on Frank Scott Parkway? And I said, yeah. And she said, the great big church. I said, yeah. She said, I've been thinking about attending there. And I said, wonderful. She said, do you attend there? I said, yeah. And she said, what do you think of it? I said, well, I like it. And I'd love to have you come and visit. Well, 2 weeks later, I get done preaching. She runs up to me, literally runs up to me and said, why didn't you tell me you were the pastor? And I said, because it shouldn't matter. It just shouldn't matter. I just wore a shirt. You asked, I offered an invitation. And I think, Lynn, one of the things with the fear is a lot of times we want success stories. This young lady did come to church. She did plug into our church. That's a success story. But that's not, the success was in the conversation, making the invitation. When she asked, having a plan, having an invitation to offer, that was where the win took place. And it gets back to Jesus' parable of the sower. Sow those seeds everywhere. Some of them are going to grow, but the win is sowing the seed. The bonus is the fact that some people are going to be reached by it.
The kicker on that story, of course, is the fact that she didn't know you were the pastor. But the part that I really love the most is that every one of your answers was like a yes or no response. Like it didn't take any skill whatsoever. You're like, yeah.
All I really wanted to do was eat my pizza before it got cold, man. That was really it. It wasn't like an evangelism trip. It was more like lunch.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That kind of thing happens all of the time. And again, it's just putting yourself in a position. I always think of offense and defense. Offense would be if I'm out, I'm talking, my grandson's playing a state junior high tournament basketball game tonight. Let's say I'm just talking with some other parents and grandparents. Somebody mentions something. I mentioned church. I offer an invitation. Okay, I'm looking for an opportunity. I find it. That's offense. Wearing a shirt's defense. I just have the shirt on. They're going to ask me about the shirt. So offense, me sharing the faith. Defense is me having an answer for that faith. But again, we want to equip people for both of those things. And I think the more arrows you have in your quiver, the better off you're going to be when it comes to evangelism, because one size certainly doesn't fit all.
That's nice. That's good. More arrows in your quiver. Let's hang on to that. Actually, we're going to be back on later this afternoon. We're going to talk again. We've got a special guest.
All my good stuff for later, Lynn.
Okay, that's good.
Really good
we're just getting started. All right, that's good.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I want to talk about
right now.
Yeah, okay, that's good. That's good. So we got a special guest. We're not going to say who it is. We got a special guest coming. It's actually one of the stars of the book.
Yeah, right.
Will be with us this afternoon. I also want to hear when we come back on about this idea of the movement and some of your dreams for the book and some of the early returns of what we're hearing about so far. So,
awesome.
Yeah. So now available. That's good news on Amazon, also on inviteresources.com and wherever you get your favorite books. We will see you again in a little bit. One more as we're passing out here. So Carolyn Moore, one of our friends in ministry, pick this one up, absorb its lessons, then buy a copy for everyone on your staff team. Good advice, Carolyn. In your small group, or just do the right thing and share it with your entire church. All right. Thanks, Shane. Thanks, Carolyn. We will talk again soon.
Thanks, Lynn. See you a little later.